Hey, what's up? Alec Pulvidente here, and we are back with another video. And today we're going to be talking about FPV drones because it's a very frequently asked question on my Instagram is how do I get started with FPV? What are some of the best drones that I could get like pre-built? And is the DJI system worth it? And also, what are some good tips to get into it? So I'm going to cover all that today. I'm not going to be showing you guys exactly how to build it since there's a lot of tutorials already and on YouTube and everything. So I'm just going to be talking more about what goes into it, all the the ups and the downs, and how to actually get started without making a lot of mistakes. So in this video, that's exactly what I'm going to talk about today. We are going to be going over all the things that go into starting with FPV. I'm going to show you guys the whole process of what it actually takes, because a lot of people that start off with FPV, they don't have a good understanding in what's actually going into it, and now they're thousands of dollars deep and they don't have a drone that works, or they keep crashing because they don't know how to fly, and they're just causing themselves more money and damage. Like, for example, when I started, I went through about 6 GoPros because I kept putting GoPros on it thinking I'm gonna get these great shots, and I wasn't ready to fly with the cinematic style. So I ended up wrecking 6 GoPros because I kept putting more on and just thinking, oh, I'm gonna get these amazing shots, but all I was doing was crashing and wrecking these cameras and parts on the drone. Now it's gonna be roughly a year before you really start flying with skill and getting these epic cinematic shots. Yeah, you could probably strap a GoPro on your drone and get some decent footage right off the bat. I got a couple cool shots, but I didn't start perfecting it until a year later when I was flying. Honestly, the best thing I think you could do is drop the idea of flying cinematic and getting these cool, unique FPV shots. The better way to learn would probably be to learn as a freestyle pilot. Because as a freestyle pilot, you're not gonna strap any cameras on there, so you won't be wrecking any cameras. And if you don't know how freestyle pilots fly, I'll show you a little clip right now. So that's how freestyle pilots fly. So you're gonna wanna learn to fly like that first, because learning as a freestyle pilot, you're going to have a better understanding at the controls of the drone. If you just start flying cinematic, it's gonna be all slow, coasting around. They're a lot easier to fly. And when something goes wrong or something happens, just anything can happen with these things. They're not a DJI system that's gonna return to home or auto land itself or hover when you let go of the sticks. You gotta have your hands on these sticks at all times to keep this thing in the air and flying perfect. You gotta correct your pitch, yaw, roll, everything you gotta do manually. So it's better to know how to handle these situations than not to. Otherwise, you're gonna be losing your expensive drones and cameras. So the best thing you could do is, like I said, start as a freestyle pilot. Go to a field, fly for a while, get the feel of diving, flipping, landing, get all that down before you put a camera on it and start trying to fly cinematic. All right, so now most people think when they get started, first thing you should be doing right away is building a drone. Now that is the completely wrong way to start. You build the drone first and buy all the equipment. You are gonna break so many parts, mess up so much, and you're gonna be spending tons of money on fixing it, and every time you crash, getting new props, all that. So I recommend doing this last. So now the first thing you should be getting is a cheap radio. This one's fairly priced. It's not the best one in the world, but getting one of these, download a simulator app. I recommend Velocidrone. There's other ones on the market that work really well, but they're more like a game, so I don't recommend them. Velocidrone feels the most real to me, so I recommend downloading Velocidrone, hooking this up to the simulator, and learning to fly first. Spend many hours on the simulator. That's what I did. I got the controller first because I knew I do not know how to fly these things. I'm not gonna wreck a ton of them and spend all this money in wrecking them and learning. So you download the simulator, you get the controller, learn to fly on there. Because you crash, you just hit the reset button. Then eventually you learn, and when you have it down, that's when you decide to start building a drone. You can buy a pair of FPV goggles. So I have the Fat Shark Dominators. I don't recommend the DJI system just yet. I know that's a question I get a lot too. Is the DJI system worth it? I honestly don't think so. I've tried it once before. I didn't get too much time on it, but I think the technology there is really great. You definitely get amazing HD video with it. Hands down, it is amazing. but one, it's very expensive, it's heavy, so your drone's gonna be heavier, you're gonna have less battery life. And the other thing is everything's so bulky, so if you're a filmmaker and you have a lot of camera gear like I do, I carry 3 drones on me, 2 DSLRs, and a lot of camera gear in my bag. I don't have the room to keep that big DJI system in there. So honestly, the DJI system isn't really worth it to me. I think they're onto something, but I just don't think it's completely there yet. The range is insane, but once you start to get distance with it, it doesn't get the little breakup that other FPV systems would have, where you get that little static and you kind of see as it's going. It kind of just goes and then you're losing a drone. I mean, I could be wrong. I only got like an hour or 2 on the system, but I just don't think it's worth it to buy it right off the bat. I would wait for the next updated system to come out, and maybe that will be better. So I use the Fast Sharks. That's the second thing you want to buy. Then you can start worrying about building a drone. Now this is going to be one of the harder parts of the whole process, even though learning to fly is very hard too, but you get the practice on the simulator, which makes it a lot easier. Building your own drone now, I can tell you this, you're probably going to make a lot of mistakes, even with all the YouTube videos out there telling you how to build them. That's what I'm not going to show you how to build today, because I'm honestly not the best builder in the world. I could build a solid drone and make it very clean, but I'm not the best in the world. I don't think I'm the one who should be teaching you. There's also many videos already on YouTube that you can just watch and learn how to fly. So I'm not going to be doing that today, but I can tell you this, you're probably going to make some mistakes building this thing. I actually learned myself building it. I luckily had 2 years of school in electronic engineering, so I had an understanding of how to solder and how to actually build electronics like this. So it was a little easier for me, but even with my background skills that I had, this was still very tough for me. There's good YouTube tutorials online, but there's nothing that says specifically for the parts that you use. And every build is different, all these parts are different, so you got to really know the schematics of what you're doing. It's going to take trial and error. You just want to be really careful you don't plug it in and have a short circuit or whatever, because you could fry a part just like that. I've done it before. My speed controller, I plugged it in when I had the wiring backwards and it fried it. You're going to want to be very careful with that. There is a thing called a smoke stopper, which you can plug in between your battery and your system to kind of stop it from doing that, but that's also not 100% accurate. Like, that's not going to save in every situation, but it will help. Roughly the parts that you should be like kind of like looking for is you're going to start with a frame. Now there's many different frames out there. I always recommend the ones for freestyle flying. I recommend a frame that's more thicker, like this, with the thicker arms, because it kind of floats through the air a little better and you glide more. Like, if you notice, like, there's the more race drones, they have very thin arms. They're just designed to be as small and compact as possible, just so they're very lightweight and fly through the air super quick. You don't really want that. My whole idea was like, that first drone I built it with a smaller frame with thinner arms. It was more of a race frame, and I thought, oh, it'll work good for video because it'll be fast. I could chase really fast vehicles and stuff like that. Completely wrong. It doesn't get as smooth as shots. So I recommend more of a fatter frame like this. You can fit the GoPro on it, like the big battery on it. This is the kind of frame I recommend. Alright, so the next part you're gonna need is a ESC, which stands for electric speed controller. You're gonna need 4 motors. You wire those into your speed controller. You're gonna need an FPV camera, and you're also gonna need a flight controller, which is basically the brain of the whole drone. You're also gonna need a VTX, which is a video transmitter. Can't really see it, it's right on the bottom in here. That's what's sending a signal to your goggles. Then you're gonna need an antenna for the VTX. You're also gonna need a receiver, which is an RX, so you could pick up from your controller. You're also gonna need props. Lots of props, because you will be breaking a lot of props. I've gone through many props in my 2 years of flying. You're gonna want to choose a prop that's got less pitch and less cut to it. The more pitch, the more faster it's gonna be, and it's not gonna fly as smooth. Right now, I use the Johnny FPV props. I'm sure you've heard of Johnny FPV. Collaborated with Zero Power, and they came up with the Johnny FPV props, which are my favorite props for flying freestyle or cinematic. They're definitely not as fast, and they definitely aren't as efficient, but they definitely fly smoother and help you get those cinematic shots. Alright, so once you learn how to solder and build your drone, the next thing you're going to need to do is actually set up your drone and get it connected to all your devices. So you're going to need to bind it up to your controller. Binding it is a little tough sometimes. Sometimes it's easy. One of the real hard parts that I find is getting it hooked up to a computer and ready to fly the first time. I'm just better with hardware than I am with software, so that could also have to do with it. But it is definitely hard to get the drone flying once it's built correctly and you have to plug it into the computer. So now you should be able to fly. You might fly it the first time and it might fly very shaky or a little weird. That's because you're gonna have to tune it. Tuning it, you basically, what you have is PIDs, or PIDs. Basically, to get it to fly smoother, you're gonna have to up the P's and lower the D's. So the next thing, after you got your drone flying and flying smooth, now you're gonna wanna take it to a field. Leave the GoPro at home, take just the drone, the controller, couple batteries, your goggles, and just start flying. Get some flight time on it. At this point, you now should have spent a lot of time on the simulator, so you should have experience flying, but now you're flying the real drone, so you want to be a little more careful. Make sure you're on an empty field, no one's around. I go to a field with a couple of trees that you can fly through just to get the feel for flying freestyle. When I did it, I was going to the field almost every day for months at a time. I spent so much time at my local field. People that were actually there, they're like, oh, hey, he's doing his thing with the drone. Okay, we'll come back later. Like it was to that point where I was there so often practicing that people just knew that's what I was doing. So find a field near you, practice on that field, keep going every day, get really good at flying the actual drone now. Velocidrone is closest you can find to flying a real drone. It's gonna be a lot different because this is a drone you built. Things could go wrong. You didn't do a proper connection. It might come off, it might crash, you might break a couple props. Now you gotta bring it back home, fix the problem that you had, and get it back at the field and just keep going until you have this thing flying perfectly and you have it down. Once you have it down, now we can start talking about getting cinematic shots. One thing you're really gonna wanna do when you're flying cinematic is you're gonna be going to these crazy locations. I'm sure you're gonna wanna dive cliffs or do some kind of cool epic shots like that, because that's what I did when I first started flying cinematic. I took my drone out to Montauk, I went out by the bluffs, dove down the bluffs because he had this epic shot. As soon as I made that turn around one of the bluffs, it cut my signal out because I didn't have an understanding on where I should stand and how to get the signal. The drone kept flying in the direction it was going and went out over the ocean and never saw it again. And I had the GoPro on it, so that's like an $800 loss right there. So you're gonna wanna make sure you're standing in the proper spot for the best range. So for your controller, you're gonna want a long range system if you're flying cinematic, because you're gonna wanna go far and get good shots. That doesn't mean you're gonna be flying through all these obstacles a mile away. I honestly don't even fly my drone a mile away. This is not like a Mavic where it's got that crazy range. Battery life is so short and the range isn't that great that I will keep it pretty close to you. I usually don't even go over a half a mile. But the best thing you can have on your goggles is a patch antenna and a omnidirectional antenna. Patch antenna is basically shooting a signal straight ahead and picking it up only straight ahead. Omnidirectional, on the other hand, does a 360 view but not as far. So when you're flying, whichever direction you're gonna go the furthest, you want this antenna facing that direction. So for example, if I was and fly again at Montauk to prevent what happened that first time, what I would do is instead of standing by the parking lot away from the edge of the bluff and going down the bluff and losing signal like that, I would stand close to the edge of the bluff. This way there's no obstacles in between me and my drone, because when you have a big obstacle or sand dune in between you and your drone, you're cutting that signal basically in half, like you're blocking that signal. So you want to have a perfect line of sight to the drone the whole time. Obviously, you're not going to be flying line of sight, you're going to be flying through the goggles. But also, that's another thing, you should probably learn to fly line of sight. It'll definitely help with landing sometimes. For example, I fly off of a boat a lot because on the island here, I'm constantly on boats. So I fly off a boat a lot, which is very sketchy because one, flying over water is sketchy because this drone isn't like a DJI drone, so it's not going to just auto hover when you let go of the sticks. Battery dies, it's dropping. Something just goes wrong, it's dropping. So there's a lot of risk flying over water. Landing on a boat is very hard, especially when you're in the goggles, because you don't want to just crash into the boat. So what I do is a lot of times I'll pull the goggles up off my face and I'll switch to line of sight and land it. So definitely learn how to fly line of sight because it'll definitely help with those tougher landings sometimes. So you want to make sure that drone is basically line of sight from what you're viewing. So really think about where you're going to fly from. It's something I always do because I learned from a huge loss, which was an $800 loss from losing that drone all the way out in Montauk in the ocean. So you really want to take into account of where you're standing when you're flying. Alright guys, so that's it for this video. I hope this video gave you a better understanding on how to get into FPV drones, and hopefully you can learn from my mistakes. So I hope you guys enjoyed, I hope you guys learned something, and don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and I'll see you guys in my next one.